YouTube, I'll check it on YouTube.
Well, welcome back to another episode of Stand on Guard. This is Question Period Cabaret. And today it's an extended session because we are hoping to catch the vote on a conservative motion to have a pause on all home heating fuel, not just heating oil in Atlantic Canada and a spattering of other places, but all heating oil, a pause of 3 years. It's not exactly an axe to tax motion that some have advertised it as, but it's significant. And we'll be following up after question period with that vote. But question period will begin shortly. I'm just going to step away for a minute or two. And you can listen to the statements, and we will be commenting unusual on the events here in question period Monday, November 6th.
The honourable member from Richmond East.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday I joined friends and colleagues from this House for a remembrance ceremony at Mount Hope Cemetery in the Waterloo region to commemorate the service of Private Buckham Singh. His grave is one of the only resting places of a Sikh Canadian soldier from World War I. In 1907, Buckham Singh Baines came to Canada at the age of 14. In 1915, he enrolled in the Canadian Expeditionary Force and served in the 20th Infantry Battalion. Buckham Singh served in the fields of Flanders and was wounded twice. After recovering in hospital, he returned to Canada, where he would pass away in 1919 and was laid to rest with full honors. Every Remembrance Day, we should all pay our respects at cenotaphs from coast to coast to coast and commemorate those who made the ultimate sacrifice for freedoms we enjoy. It is a privilege for me to stand in the House today to recognize Private Buckham Singh Baines, a great uncle from my ancestral village of Malpur, Punjab, tell this story of shared heritage, patriotic duty, and unite Canadians in commemoration of courage and service that shaped the history of Canada. We will remember all of them.
There you go.
The honourable member from North Island, Powell River.
Mr. Speaker, as we enter
What?
Veterans Week, I want to take this
What are you
opportunity
doing?
to thank the members, past and
What?
present, for their dedicated
What do you
service.
want?
We know both from
What?
history and today that the cost of conflict is far too high.
What
All
do you
too
want?
often, we as Canadians think of their service during this time of year rather than recognizing it every day. After years of working for both serving members and veterans, I understand the dedication to service is high. Their thoughts always focus on the us rather than the I. This year, I'm particularly thoughtful of servicewomen and veterans who are women. I know they have served, and those realities, both past and present, are all too often left invisible. They participate in Remembrance Day services wearing their medals on civilian gear and are asked, are those your father's, husband's, or son's medals? This year, let Canadians recommit to seeing veterans, all of them, to acknowledge and appreciate their service. Thank you to all the women who have or are serving. I see you, lest we forget.
The Honourable Member for Avignon, Lamissy-Matane, Matapédia. Mr. Speaker, in this House, it's quite rare that we can speak to good news on the environment. But here's a piece of good news. Washington State wants to join Quebec and California's carbon market. That would be a real step forward toward creating a North American carbon market. That's what Quebec dreamed of when it created that tool 10 years ago. What Washington is doing should inspire Canadian provinces. It's not only the environmental decision to make, but also that's what allows Quebec to be exempted from the federal carbon tax. If Canadian provinces are tired of being under the federal carbon tax, they can get rid of it in the blink of an eye. And still better, they can do so by joining a system that gives more leeway to individuals and instead focuses on big polluters. So once again, Mr. Speaker, why just complain when you can find concrete solutions?
The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
This NDP Liberal government has admitted that their carbon tax makes it harder for Canadians to afford to heat their homes. Liberals said that only people who elect Liberals will get a break. But Canadians know Canadians who can't afford to heat, eat, or to house themselves know that this Prime Minister just isn't worth the cost. Now, people in Ottawa have elected 7 Liberal MPs and, of course, our common sense Conservative leader. So the question is today, will the Prime Minister allow the 7 Liberal MPs to vote to take the tax off so Ottawans can keep the heat on? Ottawans and all Canadians should know that under this Conservative leader and Canada's common sense Conservatives, we will vote to axe the tax on gas, groceries, and home heating because this Prime Minister isn't worth the cost.
The honourable member from Winnipeg North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the things I really enjoy is the opportunities to be able to visit Gurdwaras. You know, one of the most common words I hear at the Gurdwaras is the issue of seva. Seva is something which means to serve, to be a volunteer, which brings me to Kelsa Aid Canada. What a wonderful organization it is. Think about it. Recognize the whole human race as one. In Team Winnipeg, and across Canada, many different jurisdictions, over this last weekend, they served groceries for international students, Mr. Speaker. In Winnipeg, we've had groceries provided to the Main Street Project, the Bear Clan on Selkirk Avenue, Winnipeg Harvest. It's a wonderful way to save, Mr. Speaker, and it's a community that adds so much value. If you want to drop off some groceries, feel free to go to 1563 Logan Avenue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Just making sure we're not going to.
Questions orales.
Here we go.
Questions.
Off we go.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Quebecers have known for a long time now that this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. But the
There they go
Bloc
again.
doesn't seem to understand that. The Bloc apparently wants to drastically increase taxes. And they even support differential and preferential application of the taxes. And we've heard in the media that there's been a guarantee that the Liberal Prime Minister will remain in power for another 2 years. So yet another costly coalition. What concessions did the Prime Minister make to the Bloc Québécois in order to stay in power for another 2 years?
This is interesting.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, our government was proud to follow in Quebec's footsteps when it comes to daycare.
Hey, Kirsty Freeland's back
Our
from the
government
dead.
is also very
She's gone for
proud
2 weeks.
to follow in Quebec's footsteps
Creating a false crisis.
when it comes to climate action. Quebec has led very well. Quebec was one of the first provinces to put a price on pollution. And we are very
Also, now
happy to
now
work
it's
with
all about Quebec
Quebecers
because the alliance with the NDP
for the
is
environment.
becoming disentangled. You see what's going on
The
here?
Honourable Leader of
What
the
a-
Opposition.
What a farce.
Yes, but my question was for the Prime Minister, who is hiding and who is not worth the cost.
Oh,
My question is
Justin's
about
not
the
there
Bloc
again?
Québécois' decision to vote in favor of home heating taxes. Today, though, we've learned that the Bloc's desire to drastically increase this Prime Minister's carbon taxes are not random. The Bloc Québécois, in fact, has promised the Prime Minister that they will keep him in power in a 2-year costly coalition. What concessions did the Bloc get in order to keep this incompetent and costly Prime Minister in power?
So now he's got another unholy alliance going here. You see this?
The Honourable Minister.
It's actually news to me. I hadn't heard
Mr.
this
Speaker,
until now.
the opposition leader wants to talk about Quebec. Fine. The opposition
always
leader
talking about
wants
Quebec.
to
What else do
move
they talk
Quebec
about?
backwards. They want to move Quebec backwards on basic rights, women's rights, climate change. They want to put firearms back in the streets.
Get back to the
in
Middle
Quebec.
Ages.
The conservative
Wow,
leader,
an
he
idiot.
wants to send Quebecers
Did he get a
and
haircut?
Canadians back to the Stone Age.
I think Pablo got a haircut.
The Honourable
He
Leader
gets
of
one
the
a year.
Opposition.
The Prime Minister is in Ottawa today, so the question is for him. He is
Yeah,
panicked
where is the Prime
now
Minister?
and put a pause on the carbon tax for 3% of Canadians in ridings where his polls are plummeting and his MPs are revolting. Also revolting were the comments of a Liberal rural affairs minister who stated that other Canadians would have got a pause on the pain if they had elected more Liberals. Yet Northern Ontarians did elect Liberals. So the question for the Prime Minister, will he allow a free vote for his Northern MPs on our common sense motion to keep the heat on and take the tax off? Yeah.
Will Trudeau be there for the vote? I don't think he gives a damn either way. It's Krista Freeland's half-brother.
Many different question periods over the past number of days. Home heating oil is 2 to 4 times as expensive as natural gas. It accelerated by 75% in 2022.
He's reading the same
script. We put into place a plan that will enable people to get off of heating oil, to have free heat pumps. It will save them up to $2,500 a year.
No,
it will make it more affordable. And at the same time, it will allow us to fight climate change. That is true for the 270,000 households that use heating oil here in Ontario.
There's no free heat pump unless you're living below the poverty line.
The question was for the Prime Minister, who first was dividing and now is in hiding. He wants to quadruple his tax, but now he's had to back down and give a pause to the pain for 3% of people in ridings where his polls are plummeting and his MPs are in full revolt against him. His Liberal Minister of Rural Affairs said if people in other regions want the same pause on the pain, they have to elect Liberal MPs. However, many did. We have a Liberal MP in Calgary and one in Edmonton. Will they be allowed a free vote on the common sense Conservative motion to take the tax off and keep the heat on?
Yeah.
The Honourable Minister.
It's important to have thoughtful public policy prescriptions that address issues around affordability in a long-term way.
When is that going to start?
But also actually address the issue of climate change. And I would say, Mr. Speaker, the only person who is hiding in this chamber is the leader of the official opposition, who is hiding the fact that he either does not believe in climate change, or he certainly doesn't think it's very important. He has not spoken the words climate change since he was elected. And he has no plan. At some point, he needs to tell Canadians,
what's the plan?
What is your plan
Tax
to
people
address the
so they
climate
can't
crisis?
afford to buy gas. That's your plan. Is that a plan? A plan for what? The oblivion?
Mr. Speaker, I'm right here while the Prime Minister hides and divides. And why wouldn't he hide? After all, he's in panic mode. He first promised to quadruple the tax on everyone. And then after I beat him in that debate, he decided to back down and lift the tax off 3% of people for a short period of time. His Rural Affairs Minister said that if other Canadians wanted the same pause from the pain, they needed to elect more Liberals. Well, Thunder Bay elected 2 Liberals. It's a very cold place. Will the members for Thunder Bay be given a free vote on our motion to take the tax off and keep the heat on?
So I see a question here from the vet in the comments section. When is the vote? Immediately following question period. We're going to be staying live to cover the vote.
Speaker,
Here's Wilkinson's sister is up now.
When it comes to protecting Canadians and their affordability.
Because don't they remind you of each other? They both are condescending. They both wave their fist at you when they're talking.
Leader. It took him 29 days to speak up for the Canada Pension Plan. But none of us should have been surprised, because last year he sought to eviscerate that plan, which is so important to every single Canadian.
Well, you've been spending on that plan, haven't you?
With our pensions or
That's the joke here. The Liberal government has been using the CPP as discretionary spending for decades. Ever since, at least since Paul Martin was finance minister.
Mr. Speaker, last week, TVA had to lay off 1/3 of its workforce.
And this guy is
That's 547
anyway, we'll just shut up the blockhead for a second here. Because believe me, he's got nothing to say. So anyway, what's going to happen this afternoon is the NDP will be supporting the Conservative motion. But the Conservative motion is not to axe the carbon tax. The Conservative motion is to put a pause on all home heating fuel, including natural gas and propane. So it's really not as much as Poilievre has been saying it is. Otherwise, the NDP wouldn't be supporting it. But the change here is apparently the Bloc might not be supporting at all, or any of its members, because Trudeau's worked out some unholy alliance with the Bloc now to stay in power. This guy has absolutely no scruples, no morality, no ethics, no nothing except a desire, a ravenous desire to stay in power. He's a disgrace to his office, to Canada, to even his goddamn party, which used to have a little bit of ethics, some sense of nobility. But I'm probably talking a long time ago. These people are just absolute political asses, is all you can really say about them. Anyway, we'll listen to some more. We'll listen to the blockheads for a while. And please continue with your comments. And I don't mind shutting up the blockheads if we have any, if we have something to address. But this is what's going to happen today. And even if the Conservatives win this motion, it's not a confidence motion, so the government will not fall, and it's non-binding. But it does indicate a splintering of support from the NDP. Seems like Trudeau is desperate, though, and he's reached out to the Bloc. I need more information on this to see exactly what's happened today. But as I said earlier, it goes to show you that Trudeau and this Liberal government have absolutely no sense of morality, no sense of right and wrong, no sense of what's even good for the country, because the Bloc are outright separatist bastards who are just trying to tear the country apart in any way they can. They're only there to squeeze you and I, any taxpayer, for anything they can get, including their own personal pensions, which are gold-plated. There we go.
On the private market, and now the average rent for one bedroom is $2,500.
This is usually Jagmeet Singh's slot. They got Jenny Kwana.
More community housing that fits
Jagmeet Singh is going to skip this vote today too, because he doesn't want to look like he's voting with the Conservatives.
Wouldn't be inflationary. The Conservative leader is calling investment in social housing a Soviet-style takeover. He's in it for wealthy investors. The Liberals are failing.
So it is a Soviet-style
Will the
takeover.
Prime Minister stop
And you're a
siding with
Soviet-style
conservatives
MP.
and commit to doubling Canada's social housing stock?
The Honourable
Do your best,
Minister
Jenny.
for Housing.
Mr. Speaker,
That's
I
your
agree
best.
wholeheartedly with my
This is the
colleague
guy
and
who
the
wants to
Conservative
fly.
leaders' rhetoric around Soviet-style housing to describe cooperatives. It
Well,
mirrors the
you're
same
another
approach he took over the
Soviet-style
course of the
MP.
summer when he labeled the Niagara Women's Home a shack, dismissing the living
You
quarters
could be
of ordinary
speaking to
Canadians
the
as
Supreme
entirely
Soviet
inappropriate.
now,
I further
back in about
agree with the NDP
1985.
member that we need to continue to make the kinds of investments that will build more social housing for low-income families. We got back into this game, into the National Housing Strategy after 30 years of absence. We're going to continue to build more homes so everyone can afford a roof over their head.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's going to
The
happen
Honourable Member
real
from
soon.
Elmwood Transcona.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, people in Newfoundland and Labrador could certainly use some help when it comes to their costs. 77%
Yeah,
are
there's
saying
no
that they're living
Jagmeet Singh
paycheck
today.
to paycheck.
He's
But what we
flown the
continue to
coop as
get
well.
are
Probably
answers
test-a-tete
that are
with
not
Justin
a
Trudeau
commitment
right now.
to doubling that social housing stock or to
Saying,
recapitalize
"Well, we're your
funds
natural
that the
allies.
government's already
Not the
created
Bloc."
to build social housing, even when it doesn't cost them money. They won't lift a finger. We stood by as
This
we
is the
watched
guy who only
the
owns one
Competition
suit,
Bureau
by
fight
the way. He
tooth and
wears
nail
this
against the Rogers Shaw
suit.
merger.
I think the
The
same
government
tie
turned
as well,
around
every
and approved
day.
it. Now they have a chance to support our initiative to strengthen the Competition Act. Will they do it?
You have to comment sometimes just beyond the
Honourable
politics
Minister.
because
Mr. Speaker,
it's
I'd like
such a
to thank the member for his question.
It's a
In fact, Mr. Speaker,
champagne.
him and member of this House will have an
This guy's the
opportunity
biggest,
to do something
one
for
of the biggest
Canadians.
jokes
I've
on the
asked
floor.
the leader of the
Sitting
opposition
next
to
to
do one thing for Canadians, not something he does very often,
sitting
but one
next to
thing
two other
was
big
to go
jokes
for
on the floor.
C56, Mr. Speaker, because in C56, Canadians will be happy to learn that at home, but we're going to reform competition, Mr. Speaker. We're going to give more power to the competition
What a
commissioner.
clown.
We're going to remove these
This is the guy who thinks the grocery stores are going to come up with a magic plan to lower all the prices.
Competitions. We want more competition, lower prices in this country, Mr.
Yeah,
Speaker.
you know what's going to happen? You'll have low prices in your grocery store, but nothing
The
to buy.
Honourable Leader of the
That's what they had in the Soviet Union.
The NDP
That's what they had in
voted
Venezuela.
16 times in favor of the carbon tax. Its leader has supported quadrupling the tax on the home heating of every single Canadian. But after working class union households have been abandoning his party for the Conservatives in droves, he has now flip-flopped. But that has involved the courage of admitting he was wrong. Will the Prime Minister show the same courage and admit he, just like the NDP leader, is dead wrong and vote for our common sense motion to keep the heat on and take the tax off?
Yeah, somebody says Jagmeet is on a mandate with Justin today. Yeah, as I said, the two are tete-a-tete.
Closest to the
Oh,
problem. And in
this
Atlantic,
guy's so
Canada, we
full
have
of
an ecology
crap.
action center based in Halifax who wrote a statement that I think was prescient to the debate that's going on here. It says energy poverty and climate change represent a direct threat to working class people in Nova Scotia. As
No,
a
your
society,
carbon tax
we must work
represents a
together
direct
to ensure
threat.
households with low incomes can transition
We're
away
not
from
threatened by
expensive
climate
fossil fuels
change
to technologies like heat
induced by
pumps
Canadians
that are
anyway.
cheaper, better for our health, and afford us the comforts associated with heating and cooling. Policy makers are finally rising to meet the challenge.
You know, I'll tell you again, Canada produces 1.4% of greenhouse gas emissions. No effect at all on the global carbon
After
footprint,
8
and this
years, the
idiot
Prime
knows that.
Minister is just not worth the cost. Now he wants to
Andrew, don't
quadruple
bother
the
with
tax
this, with the
on
cost.
home heating, gas, and groceries. But he decided to pause the pain for just 3% of families in areas where he's plummeting in the polls and his MPs are revolting. The Liberal Rural Affairs Minister said if people on the prairies wanted a break from the carbon tax exemption, they should have elected more Liberal MPs. Well, the people in Sudbury did elect a Liberal. I visited there last week, and people there want to know why their MP has been unable to get them a pause
Yeah,
on
their
the
MP
pain.
couldn't
so
do
simple
it.
question for the Prime Minister. Will he allow a free vote for the member for Sudbury on our motion to take the tax off and keep the heat on?
Their Liberal MP just couldn't deliver. Clearly.
The Honourable Minister.
Where's Justin? Yes, he's with
Speaker, I
Jagmeet.
think it's important for Canadians that people are serious in terms of bringing forward policy prescriptions, not simply taglines. We have put into place measures
We're going to
that
do
will
a
address
split
critical
screen
affordability
today
issue.
with
Home heating oil is
Jonathan
2 to 4
Wilson
times
next
as
to
expensive as
Chrystia
natural
Freeland.
gas. It went up
And you can say,
75%
were these two
during
separated at
2022.
birth?
There is
Because
an
they
opportunity
both
to be able
seem to
to
speak
reduce the energy
exactly the
costs for people
same,
on an ongoing basis,
waving their hand
all
at
the
you,
while addressing the
looking
issue
little
of climate change,
condescending, and the
something that the leader of
bobblehead
the
look
opposition
too.
clearly
Yes.
does not believe in. It is something that is important for Canada. It's important for the 270,000 Ontario homes that currently heat with heating oil.
Yeah. He does have his script down pretty good. I mean, he's read it about probably about 50 times now.
Mr. Speaker, their pause on the pain doesn't apply to 97% of Canadians, and it punishes those who use cleaner Canadian natural gas and propane to heat their homes. What did the Liberal Rural Affairs Minister have to say? She said, well, if people in other areas want the pause too, they should elect Liberals. Well, the people in North Bay did elect a Liberal MP. So again, to the Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, will he allow a free vote so that the members from North Bay can vote on our motion to take the tax off and keep the heat on?
The honourable member is a veteran member of this House, and he knows that all questions, I will remind all members that all questions are directed through the chair. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Yeah, I think he knows.
Mr. Speaker. And as I said last week, it would be great if in this House we could have debates about how we fight climate change, not whether we fight climate change, because in 2023, it's really not an option. It's an existential threat. And we're living
It's an
in a
existential
climate
threat.
emergency. And Canadians know how important it is to
And
fight climate change. They know
1.4%
that
of
on
greenhouse
this
gas
point,
emissions?
the
Is that an
Conservatives have
existential threat?
absolutely no
So your
plan.
carbon
You don't
tax
have
is
a
going to
plan for the
change
environment.
anything?
You don't have a
No.
plan for the economy, Mr. Speaker. Those conservatives
Why don't you get a plan
continue to be
for
risky
a
and
tie?
irresponsible, and they're
We could
certainly
start
not
with that.
worth that risk.
Yes, we're all going to bed at night worrying and fretting about
Years of
climate
this
change.
Liberal NDP government, the Prime Minister's carbon tax is making it impossible for Canadians to heat their homes this winter. That's especially true right here in soon-to-be frigid Ottawa. There are 12 Liberal MPs here, a cabinet minister, 3 privy councillors, 4 parliamentary secretaries, but according to the minister from Newfoundland, all of these MPs weren't effective enough to get their communities a pause on the pain of the carbon tax. Will they make things right and stand with us today and axe the tax, or will they vote again with the Prime Minister and leave Ottawa residents in the cold?
They're going to leave us in the cold. And if you don't, by the way, if you're commenting about not wanting my comments, go someplace else, please. This is what this is about. You can watch this on CPAC anytime you want.
Conservative caucus for leadership on fighting climate change.
No,
In fact,
no.
the member from Wellington
Patience
Halton Hills
for that
staked his
shit.
entire conservative leadership campaign on it. What he said exactly, and I quote, is the right way to do it is to price carbon through a revenue neutral carbon tax. He staked his entire conservative leadership campaign on that. Sadly, he lost. But you know, Mr. Speaker, I agree with him when he said we don't have a plan to fight climate change and reduce emissions, then we won't win the next election. That was true in 2019, that was true in 2021, and it's true today.
And if you don't have a plan to get rid of the carbon tax, you're going to be steamrolled in the next election because it's all over, folks. People are not putting up with this any longer.
If the Prime Minister can pause the pain for some Canadians, then surely he can do it for all Canadians. These Liberal MPs should be demanding that. But they are missing in action. Like the MIA Liberals from the GTA, like that member. Their communities want relief from this costly coalition, but they've been hiding for a week. So I'll give them the chance to show up now. Will the Prime Minister allow the members whose phone number starts with 905 a free vote to take the tax off so their communities can keep the heat on?
Thank you, Ken. I will keep the comments coming. Even though occasionally you get some idiot that doesn't want you to do that. I don't. That's what I'm here for.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what my honourable colleagues could continue
It's the
to
government
forget
house
is that
leader.
This policy does apply right across the country.
That's
so
right.
whether you are in the GTA,
true.
whether you are in Northern Ontario, whether you are in Saskatchewan or Manitoba or
That's right.
anywhere
That's
else
right.
in this
Everywhere in
country,
the
the price on pollution has been removed for those that use
You hear-
home
you hear
heating
Freeland
oils. Mr.
echoing her
Speaker,
remarks there?
It would
That's
be
right.
good if the
That's right.
Conservatives actually focused on the facts and
Across the
allowed us
country.
to debate climate change and how we're going to fight it, not if climate change is real or not. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Good answer.
Good answer, Christia says. Good answer.
The honourable member from Kenora.
The Prime Minister is planning to quadruple the tax on heat, gas, and groceries, but he decided to pause the pain for 3% of families in areas where he's plummeting in the polls and where his MPs are revolting. The Liberal Rural Affairs Minister has said if others wanted the pause, then they should have voted Liberal. But people in Nickel Belt voted for a Liberal MP, Mr. Speaker, yet they are not seeing a pause in this tax. So will the Prime Minister today allow the member from Nickel Belt a free vote to vote with us to take the tax off and keep the heat on for people in Northern Ontario and right across the country?
The honourable minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I am so proud to be a Northern Liberal Member of Parliament because what I do every day, Mr. Speaker, is I work with constituents who are telling me we need to take faster action on the climate because we are losing acres
I'm
of
sure she
forest,
hears
Mr.
that
Speaker,
all
because
the
we are
time.
seeing droughts, yes, even in Northern
From her
Ontario,
focus
Mr. Speaker,
groups,
making
maybe.
it harder to grow food, making it harder to grow our economy.
You're making it harder to grow
expect
food.
me to
Idiots
advocate
like
for
you.
clean environment, and that's exactly what I'll do.
You hear this BS? It's the Liberal government that won't let farmers use fertilizer, puts a huge tariff on the fertilizer from Russia, so they can't use it.
Mr.
So
Speaker,
who's preventing
let's
us from
talk about
growing
immigration
food?
targets. Allow me to cite a
Idiots
document.
like Patty Head.
Starting in
Used to be a-
2026, set the
Oh,
annual
God, that
immigration
woman is
target
just
at some
incredibly
500,000
dense.
immigrants if the population reaches 40 million as planned. You might think that I'm quoting the
It'll
plan
reach
that the
40 million
Liberals
real
announced
quick if we
last
keep
week.
letting in
But no,
immigrants and
I'm
refugees
quoting
at the
McKinsey's
alarming
Century
rate we are.
Initiative.
So,
The capping of targets announced for 2026 has literally been McKinsey's plan all along. When is the federal government going to adjust the targets based on our integration capacity instead of blindly following the advice of McKinsey, which is a private company that literally manages immigration in Canada?
actually, the bloc has a point, even though it's totally focused on
Honourable
Quebec.
Immigration
It's very
Minister.
true. It's McKinsey who's
Mr.
writing
Speaker,
these reports.
I think that's an odd comment. The bloc is so out of
Well,
left
Mark
field.
Miller, you're an odd man.
They're so far out in the field that they should go out into the fields and see agriculture workers and see if they need some help. Quebec needs temporary foreign workers. We are working with Quebec, and the Bloc should understand that. The honourable member for Montarville. Mr. Speaker, not only is Ottawa following McKinsey, Ottawa is following them blindly. McKinsey themselves confirmed that their immigration targets do not take integration capacity into account. Former CEO Dominic Barton said in committee last year, The focus was solely on the economy. We were not thinking about the social context. We were thinking about productivity. Mr. Speaker, capping immigration targets at 500,000 means applying advice that does not take into account our integration capacity. But the government, last week, promised to respect our integration capacity. So will the government review its targets? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I never talked to McKinsey. I talked to Canadians who want more foreign workers. They want more immigrants to come and work in factories.
And live where?
And in the fields. 500,000 is a
These
reasonable
half-wits
target.
are always
it's a target
talking
3
about
years
the
down the line,
housing
and it has nothing to
crisis.
do with McKinsey's advice.
And they want to bring in
The Honourable Member for
500,000 a
Montarville.
year
Mr.
and live
Speaker,
where?
the only difference between Ottawa and McKinsey is that Ottawa is going faster. McKinsey predicted that the population would hit 40 million by 2026. We reached that mark in June. According to Stats Canada, if the 2022 and 2023 trend continues, the population will double in just 25 years. The population will exceed 80 million by 2048, regardless of our integration capacity for housing, health, education, French language training, and the list goes on. Mr. Speaker, when will this government finally understand that successful immigration means respecting our integration capacity?
Actually, that's a very sensible question from the block.
The Honourable
It's a
Minister.
very sensible question. And this is a
Mr.
very
Speaker,
insensible
over
immigration
the past
minister.
year, Canadians have asked us to do more when it comes to integration capacity. But what people have also told me is that we need immigration to help our businesses grow.
nobody's telling you
There is
that.
still a labor shortage. The approach that we need to prioritize is to be more strategic with our targets. We tabled new strategic targets just recently, and the Bloc should be comforted by
Yes,
that if they like immigration,
yes,
and
you
if
have
they
a
don't, then
cap
let them say so.
in 2026.
The Prime Minister plans to quadruple the carbon tax on heat, gas, and groceries. Now, he decided to pause the paying for 3% of families where his poll numbers were plummeting and his MPs were revolting. The Liberal Rural Affairs Minister said if
Yeah, the
people in the
MPs are
prairies wanted
revolting.
a carbon tax break, they should elect Liberals. Well, the people in Sault Ste. Marie, Mr. Speaker, did elect a Liberal MP, and yet the majority of his constituents are not getting the break. Will the Prime Minister allow the MP from Sault Ste. Marie to freely vote to take the tax off and keep the heat on for the people of the Sioux?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Conservative Party, as is often the case, is leaving out many important facts. 8 out of 10 Canadian families actually get more money back in the rebate than they pay in the price
Lie.
of pollution.
Total
It is
lie.
an important part of having a robust
Total
plan to
lie.
address climate change in a thoughtful way. With respect to home heating, it is a particular issue that we can invest in.
I've got
to
nothing
ensure that
back
we are actually
from
saving money
carbon
for
tax.
people
Nothing.
as we move forward while continuing to address climate change.
I bet you
The
all of you
Conservative Party is
watching
hiding.
today
They are
have
hiding
got
from evidence,
nothing
from
back
science.
in
They
your
are hiding from
carbon
evidence.
tax
They
rebate.
need to
This
have a plan to
liar.
fight climate change.
How
Canadians
dare
expect
he stand
more.
up there and tell you you're getting 8 of the 10 families are getting more back in rebates than they're paying in the carbon tax?
Canadians
What
are
a
watching for today's vote
bald-faced
on our
lie.
common sense conservative motion to take the tax off all forms of home heating for all Canadians. The Liberal Rural Affairs Minister said, though, that if people want a pause on the tax, they should have elected more Liberals in their region. But Thunder Bay did elect 2 Liberal MPs, and yet folks there aren't getting any pause. Instead, the Prime Minister plans to quadruple the tax on heat, gas, and groceries rather than treating them fairly. So the question is, will the Prime Minister allow these 2 Liberal MPs from Thunder Bay to vote freely to take the tax off so people can keep the heat on?
Yeah, I'm seeing everybody commenting now saying, no, I never got a rebate on the carbon tax. And I don't know anybody who did.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, the
It's-
Conservatives continue to spread information in this chamber. This
Information, not
pause
misinformation.
on the price on pollution on home heating oil.
It's not
applies
pollution.
right across the country.
You are
despite what
you.
the
Your
Conservatives
words are
keep
pollution.
saying. But
The
what is
Liberal government is
particularly
pollution.
concerning, and I think I speak on behalf of every Ontario member of Parliament and many Ontario residents, is every time they say common sense, it brings up the terrible memories of the Mike Harris years when
I don't have
not
any
only
terrible
did they
memories of Mike
slash
Harris.
public services, but
I
they
have terrible
slashed them
memories
in
of Justin
such
Trudeau.
incredible ways that led to things like Walkerton. Mr. Speaker, Ontarians remember, and they're not going to elect common sense Conservatives again. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well, let's hope they have some common sense because you people lack any of it.
The Honourable Member from South Dundas, Stormont Dundas, South Glengarry.
Here's just how out of touch and tone deaf the Liberals are. When asked if she'd support giving the same pause on home heating back home, their own minister right from Thunder Bay said, quote, "We don't have the same challenges in Northern Ontario that we see in Atlantic Canada," unquote. Well, I visited Thunder Bay last week, and let me tell you, Mr. Speaker, it gets very cold there too, just like Atlantic Canada. And after 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, the cost of living crisis in the area is so bad, the regional food bank can't keep up with surging demand, now at 12,000 people. Will the Prime Minister let his Thunder Bay MPs vote to give residents fair treatment, take the tax off?
Well, we don't know because the Prime Minister is not there again.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservative Provincial
There
Finance
she goes with the
Minister
hand
of
again.
Ontario knows that pensions matter for the people of Ontario. That's why he wrote me a letter asking me to convene a meeting of all the provincial finance ministers to defend our pensions. Will
It's
the
just so
Conservative
obvious,
MPs
Christia.
from Ontario be equally courageous and responsible in defending the pensions of the people of Ontario and support our effort to keep the pensions of all Canadians safe?
Just rabid prevaricator.
I'm going to ask all members, please, especially the member from Battle Creek, Battle River Crowfoot.
Well, you can't quite get it out, can you, Greg?
Listen to the responses.
He has a lot of trouble remembering where these people are from.
Members to listen to that member when that
I don't know how
does
this
take
guy
the floor.
ever got
The
elected.
honourable member from London Fanshawe.
Palestinian Canadians in my riding did everything possible to work with Global Affairs Canada to get their loved ones out of Gaza. They put all of their hopes on Sunday's evacuation, only
Hey,
to
don't
hear
worry,
nothing from
Canada's
Canadian
taking in
officials.
hundreds of
The
thousands
bombardments
of
are getting more
refugees
intense. My
from Gaza,
constituents,
even though they
their
don't want to come
families,
here.
Canadian citizens are trapped. They
Have
need
you
this
heard about that
government
one?
to stand
Yeah, it's
for
coming.
human rights and to protect
Hundreds of
lives.
thousands of
The heads
refugees who
18
don't
UN
even
agencies
want
and
to leave
NGOs
Gaza
and my
are going to be
constituents are calling
resettled
for a
across the
ceasefire.
world,
Why can't the Prime
including
Minister?
Canada. Yeah, that's the plan. And the immigration minister did not deny it last week. Like he tripped over himself.
The situation in Gaza is dire, and
Don't
many
want to speculate,
Canadians
but
are worried about their loved ones. What is happening on the ground is fluid and unpredictable, and we know there are delays at the Rafah crossing for all countries. I want to reassure Canadians that we are in regular contact with Egypt and Israel to
I'm
push
assured.
for Canadians to leave as soon as possible. We continually try to reach all Canadians,
They
permanent
have a
residents,
clue
and their
what's going
immediate
on.
family members to convey the latest information. Mr. Speaker, that's why we continue to call for humanitarian pauses for Canadians to get out, for aid to get in, and for all hostages to be released. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
That's true. Very
The
true.
honourable member for Windsor West.
No, actually, it's
Mr.
Vicky.
Speaker,
Vicky Lindsay,
18 United
you're
Nations
dead on.
agencies
The
and
Liberals do
international
keep
NGOs,
changing the
including
subject
UNICEF and
because
Save the
they
Children,
can never
call for an immediate
address
ceasefire
any of the
in
matters
Israel-Palestine
they
expressing
encounter.
shock
They just
and
keep
horror at the
moving,
mounting
shifting,
death toll from the conflict, saying it's a
refocusing.
graveyard for children. It's been 30 days. Enough is enough.
No, the
UN
NDP
and the
is
NGO
moving
heads
in this
said
direction.
in a
They don't want to
rare
talk
joint
about the
statement,
carbon
this
tax
must
today.
stop now. When will this government finally do what most of the world has called for? And
Have you
that's an
noticed that? Not a
immediate
single
ceasefire to
NDP
save the
question
children
has
right
had anything to do with the carbon tax. They want their cake and eat it too. This is what Jugmeat told them. Yeah. Okay, we've said we're going to vote with the Conservatives, but don't talk about it. We don't want really that much information released. We really don't want to talk about it. We don't want people to know it that
What is
intimately.
unfolding in Gaza
But
is
we
a
can
human
say at some point,
tragedy.
hey, we
the Minister of Foreign
supported
Affairs has been to the region
extending the
twice to
pause.
oversee our efforts to help Canadians, but also
All
to
about optics.
de-escalate
It's always
the
about
situation.
optics with these
That's why we
people.
continue to call for international humanitarian law to be upheld and for humanitarian pauses so that Canadians can leave, humanitarian aid can get in, and all hostages are released. Canada is committed to a goal of a just and lasting peace in the Middle East.
The honourable member from Yukon.
Mr. Speaker, we know that many Canadian families are struggling to make ends meet.
Here's
This
a
is particularly
softball.
the case in the Yukon,
How
where more than half
are
of
we
families
how
spend
are we
over 30%
doing?
of their
What are
income
we
on
doing to
housing.
help the
The
livelihoods
Minister of National Revenue
of
recently
all
made an important
Canadians?
announcement alongside Ms. Tracy Ann McPhee, Yukon Minister of Health and Social Services. Can the Minister of National Revenue inform the House of this announcement and how it will affect our Yukon.
Oh, that's a great question.
The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm proud to announce that Yukon families can now apply for the Canada Child Benefit when registering for the birth of their newborn through the automated benefits application service of Yukon Vital Statistics Office. It's the quickest and easiest way to apply for and receive the benefit. It's more than $5,500 on average per year for Yukon families. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Oh, wow, what an answer.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. After 8 years of this Liberal government, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost, and they want to stay in power for the next
He's not worth the price of coffee.
2 years. The Liberal Bloc Coalition will vote against our motion to eliminate or pause the carbon tax on all forms of heating. Yes, it costs. It's expensive to vote for the Bloc as well. It doesn't. Does it not bother the Bloc to vote the Liberals for the next 2 years? What promise did the Prime Minister make for the unconditional support of the Bloc? The Honourable Minister.
Yeah, there's Pablo with his new haircut. What do you think? Hey,
Found ourselves in a time
Pablo made his
machine
once-a-year
here.
visit to the barber today. Look at that.
In terms of the rights of women and
a little less like a homeless person, like he does every other
back in
day.
terms of climate change and the fight against it. They're
Might
not
have even
able
trimmed
to
the beard a bit.
describe climate change.
But
they want
still can't get the tie
to bring
right,
us back
but-
to the Stone Age.
Yeah, you're bringing it back to the Stone Age. You want us to live in
The
caves.
Honourable Member for
How
Mégantic-L'Érable.
stupid are these people?
We're looking at a government from the Stone Age. We are going to vote on a motion that will require the government to pause all carbon tax on home heating for all Canadians. The Bloc has chosen its camp. They want to radically increase the carbon tax, and it's imposed, it's in favor of a 20% extra tax to each liter of gas. It's expensive to vote Bloc. What did the Prime Minister promise its partner, the Bloc, to raise taxes on the backs of all Quebecers? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, for a rare time, I agree with my colleague. We are going to have a government from the Stone Age. We're taking a step back,
What the
on
hell is he
fundamental
talking
rights
about?
in terms of arms control.
They
a
must have
step
cut
back
more
in
than
terms
his
of
hair.
the fight against climate change. He has clearly said this. We're going back to the Stone Age, Mr. Speaker. This is incredible.
You
We'll
clearly
never take
said
a step
that,
back.
Pablo. You want us to go back to the Stone Age and live in caves with no electricity, no heating, no anything?
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker,
What a
after
walking
eight
joke these
years
people are.
of this Liberal government, who would have believed it? The Bloc is now behind the supporting the Liberal government morally. They seem to be getting along quite well because their position in terms of heating divided Canadians. But that's exactly what the Bloc wants to do, divide and create problems. The Bloc wants to radically increase carbon tax. It will inspire them.
Yeah, some
My question
comment here. I'll
is
wait
that
for a sec.
will members be able to vote for common sense?
Comment from Vault Dweller. Pablo looks like a silver Che Guevara. Yeah. A little
I
less,
think all members would
a
like
little less manicured, actually.
colleagues order. I think all colleagues would like
Yeah,
to
put a beret
hear
on
the
him.
answer from the Honourable
He
Minister.
could pass
The
for
Honourable
Che
Minister.
Guevara. Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, my
Oh, no.
colleague that was the last person to speak at the National Assembly before the
It's
adoption
the woman with the rat's
of
nest
the
hairdo.
carbon market. It was adopted via unanimous consent. If he didn't like it then, why didn't he raise his voice then and speak against
Oh.
it? Why did he change his position today?
Get-
Because he
wipe
didn't
that
speak
hair
out
out of your
against
eyes, eh?
unanimity at the time. What has changed for my colleague over the past few years? He wants to go back to the Stone Age, and we won't go there, Mr. Speaker.
This is so ironic. We've got this talking point today about going back to the Stone Age when that's where the Liberals are taking us. Talk
Honourable
about
Member for Louis
distraction.
Saint Laurent. Mr.
Talk about
Speaker,
hypocrisy.
another thing means that the Bloc is
really buddy-buddy with the Liberal Party. The Parti Québécois budget, it talks about the poor management of the Liberal government is now an argument in favor of independence. No, we're not going back to the Trudeau Stone Age, that's for sure. Will the Blocs members be able
It's the
to
battle of the
speak
Stone
up
Ages.
and make sure that all of their members will be able to vote for common sense?
Can't wait to see how the Bloc vote. I think I know what's going to happen.
Hello?
Order. The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're seeing once again that every time a Conservative member rises, there's something hiding. They're not able to say the truth. They're not able to
Talk about
take
the pot
responsibility for what
calling
they
the
did in the
kettle black.
past.
What a joke.
It's really rare when you have a Quebec colleague. Well, when they supported the carbon market, they should have been proud of what happened in Quebec and proud to be able to protect the environment across Canada.
Wouldn't want to run into that woman on a dark and stormy night.
The Honourable Member for Rivière-du-Nord. Mr. Speaker, more than 221,000 SMEs are at risk of bankruptcy if the
that's the
federal
Bloc's other
government does
obsession.
not defer repayment of CEBA loans without
They
the loss of the
want their
subsidy.
money back.
We're not talking about
Give us
billionaire
the money.
multinational companies. We're talking about small businesses that contribute to the vitality of our regions. Here in Rivière-du-Nord, 213 SMEs have alerted the Quebec Federation of Independent Businesses that bankruptcy is looming. Mr. Speaker, when will the minister finally offer businesses the postponement they're asking for and avoid a wave of bankruptcies on her conscience? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, we've already granted small
Oh,
businesses
poor Richie.
one additional
She
year
gets up once a day with this small business question from
to
the Bloc.
refund part of the CEBA loan. When they asked for more assistance, we offered greater flexibility in terms of refinancing and more time, and a
So I would
one-year
say,
prolongation of the deadline for
it's going to shut
for
up
the
the Bloc's response
refund.
here because the Bloc has nothing more
Unlike
to
the
add. But you know what's going on here? Trudeau is embattled in his leadership right now with the caucus. They can see the dominoes are falling on the carbon tax, and Trudeau refuses to take any kind of leadership. So it's fascinating how he just avoids, turns his back, removes himself from any situation in which he finds himself uncomfortable or unable to provide a coherent response, which is about all the time. But when he's overwhelmed by events, by policy decisions, he just disappears. He just decides not to answer the question, not to deal with it. And he leaves it to people like Freeland, who is just as annoying as Justin Trudeau. And God only knows where Trudeau is going to be 2 months from now. I think it could be a whole different scenario.
Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker.
There she is again.
We are proud of having created a program that provided $49 billion in support to our SMEs across the country. And what's important today is that small businesses have until December 31st, 2026 to refund their CEBA loan in full. We are here for our small businesses in Quebec and across Canada at these essential times. The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord. Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this Liberal government, food banks are overflowing, groceries cost more, and now today, the Bloc is supporting the Liberals to maintain the carbon tax on the back of Quebecers. Mr. Speaker, it costs expensive to vote for the Bloc. It's expensive. Are the Liberals forming new coalition with the Bloc to increase taxes on the backs of Quebecers?
That will be my headline in the post-millennial. If the Bloc is in block, yeah. Trudeau buys separatist vote to bolster his carbon tax. That's what's going on here. Oh, and this speaker is just embarrassing to watch. He's just too much. Eh? He always looks like he's on the verge of crying or laughing. So I don't know whether to cry or laugh either watching it.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Merci, monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Unfortunately, I have to explain this once again.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have to listen to you once
There is no carbon
again.
price in Quebec, a tax rather. Canadians are concerned by climate change, and we need a plan, Mr. Speaker. Those conservatives, Mr. Speaker,
Those conservatives
are not worth the risk. And that is why we created a system. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from St. Albert, Edmonton.
Speaker, after 8 years of this NDP Liberal
government,
government,
Michael, what do you got to
Alberta
say?
shafted yet again. With Liberal support collapsing in Atlantic Canada, this desperate Prime Minister gave Atlantic Canadians a pause on his punitive carbon tax on home heating, while Albertans got nothing. Today, the Liberal Minister from Edmonton Centre has a choice. Will he support our common sense conservative motion to axe the tax on home heating, or will he once again sell out his constituents to his boss, the Prime
And that's
Minister?
that Liberal cabinet minister from Edmonton. That's the idiot who suggested people convert to home heating oil so they can get the carbon tax reduction. This is the idiot here.
That we have billions of dollars in budget 23 for carbon capture use and storage.
One of the
we
clowns.
have green and clean electricity regulations and money that will benefit Alberta. But Mr. Speaker, that member doesn't want people to know that he's one of the CPC Silent 30 who have not come to the aid of Albertans. He is not defending the Canada Pension Plan. He doesn't care that the Conservative
What does this have to do with the Canada Pension Plan, you
He's
halfwit?
silent. We're going to protect pensions. That's our job, and we're going to do it every day.
You have never protected a pension. And why on earth should Alberta not be allowed to have its own pension plan when Quebec does? Why doesn't anyone ever bring that up in the House of Commons? Even the Conservatives never bring that up.
Plans on quadrupling the tax on gas, groceries, and home heating. He gave 3% of Canadians a pause on the carbon tax for home heating, where his poll numbers were tanking and his MPs were revolting. The Liberal Rural Affairs Minister said if people on the prairies want to pause on the tax, they should elect more Liberals. Well, the MP of Calgary Skyview is a Liberal, but his constituents don't get the pause. Will the Prime Minister let that member mail in a free vote on our common sense Conservative motion to take the tax off and keep the heat on, and shove this carbon tax where the Prime Minister's poll numbers are, in the gutter?
Honestly, I hate this fact because they're blocking the sound now.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, another silent Conservative on the issue of pensions in Alberta. What a
There we go.
shame to be a Calgary Conservative. But Mr. Speaker, let's talk about Conservative priorities coming out of Alberta. Instead of building housing, instead of growing our economy, instead of actually doing the work of Albertans, what does the UCP AGM, what are their priorities, Mr. Speaker? Turning back protections for LGBTQ2 people, taking our province back, Mr. Speaker.
And Mr. LGBTQ has to bring this up like it's got anything to do with today's debate.
Machines,
What an idiot.
15-minute cities. They're out of touch, and they are reckless and not worth the cost.
God, you're not worth minimum wage. God, if Edmonton keeps sending that clown back.
I ask all members to please listen to their whips in terms of having more order in this House so that we can hear not only the questions but the answers.
The honourable member
There are
for
no answers,
Dorval,
so we're not
Lachine,
missing
LaSalle.
anything.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am very proud
Oh,
of
dear.
our national content creators,
gonna be another
whether in Quebec
softball.
or elsewhere in Canada. Last week, Montrealers once again welcomed people from all over the world to Cinemania, a festival that has
Cinemania.
enjoyed nearly 3 decades of success and
sounds
showcased
like a
some of the
statement.
most incredible francophone voices and creations that Canada has to share.
Blah,
Can the minister
blah,
tell us
blah.
more about the important
Yeah,
international
let's
agreement
have a
that was signed
useless
last
question and a
Friday?
useless answer at this stage.
The Honourable Minister of Canadian
Tell us
Heritage.
about
Thank you,
Cinerama,
Mr. Speaker.
please.
My colleague is absolutely right. Canada last week welcomed for the first time in Canada the President of Switzerland, and my colleague, the Minister of Foreign Affairs,
Oh,
signed
nice.
a
How
co-protection
nice for you, Pascal.
audiovisual agreement to increase the number of films and projects with higher budgets. So
Oh,
it's
that's
an
wonderful.
excellent piece of news for
That's
our creators
excellent.
in Canada. This
That's
was
just great.
international efforts. We're going to continue to support our
Yes, yes. You're
audiovisual
going to continue
producers
to
because we
stay in
know
the
how
gravy
important they are
train.
in
Yes.
Canada.
That's what you'll do, Pascal.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister plans to quadruple the tax on heat, gas, and groceries. But now he's decided to pause the pain for just 3% of families in areas where he's plummeting in the polls. The Liberal Rural Affairs Minister said if people on the prairies wanted a pause on the tax, they should have elected more Liberals. But the people in St. Boniface, St. Vital
Doesn't do any good.
did elect a Liberal MP, and
Yes,
yet his
yes.
constituents aren't getting the pause. So the question is, will the Prime Minister allow the MP for St. Boniface, St. Vital to freely vote to take the tax off, keep the heat on for his constituents?
Yes, just too much excitement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The member is talking about a national program that get rid of polluting, expensive home heating oil, and to transition those homes with free heat pumps into those homes. Mr. Speaker, this national program is applicable across Canada. It's applicable in Manitoba, where are thousands of people who use home heating oil. It's great for the environment. It's great for affordability. I plan to support this.
The honourable member from Charleswood, St. James, Assiniboia, Headingley.
The Prime Minister plans to quadruple the tax on heat, gas, and groceries. But then he decided to pause the pain for 3% of families in areas where he was plummeting in the polls and his MPs were revolting. The Liberal Rural Affairs Minister actually said if people on the prairies wanted a pause on the tax, they should have elected more Liberals. But here's the thing, the people of Winnipeg South Centre did elect a Liberal MP, and yet his constituents are not getting the pause. Will the Prime Minister allow that MP from Winnipeg South Centre a free vote to take the tax off and keep the heat on for people in his community?
Once again, I'd like to encourage all members, colleagues, all members to please hold your comments back to the time
Yes,
that you have the floor to ask
hold
a
your
question
comments.
or to give an answer. That way we can hear everything that's going on from all ends of the House. The Honourable Minister.
How many Liberals use heat pumps? Good
Stop
question.
spreading misinformation.
Shiloh,
This is
yes.
a national program.
I don't think one of
a national program that
in the
aims
House of
to
Commons uses a heat
transition,
pump because they all know they're worthless.
environmentally damaging home heating oil into free heating pumps, Mr.
There's
Speaker.
no
This
free
is
heating
a
pump.
national policy that's applicable across Canada. There are thousands of homes in Manitoba who are eligible for the program.
What a joke of a
for the
policy.
environment. This is great for affordability.
Transition to a device that's not going to keep you warm in the winter. That's the Liberal plan. This is just a cruel joke. How stupid they think Canadians are.
Winnipeg North gets up into this place and talks and talks and talks and screams.
Hey, James.
Says absolutely nothing. According
Oh. Well, we don't get to hear what's going on here. James Bazan was given hell.
Once
Good for James.
again,
Once again.
before I return to colleagues, before I return to the member from Selkirk, Interlake, Eastman, I'm going to ask all colleagues once again to please, when you have the floor, use it. When you don't have the floor, listen to the person who does. The honourable member from 25. Honourable member, excuse me.
They have to decide who he is. What an idiot. This man is just functionally not there. Excuse me.
I know the I know the honourable member is anxious. I'd like to give the honourable member the opportunity to start his question from the top.
And where is he from? No, he's forgotten that.
Well, Mr. Speaker, every day the member from the North Winnipeg gets up here and all he does is talk, talk, and talk. Only the Liberals like it because he says absolutely nothing. Now, according to the Rural Affairs Minister, the member from Winnipeg North failed to stand up and fight for Manitobans. Because of him, Manitobans have been left out in the cold. They can't afford to heat and eat after 8 miserable years of this Prime Minister and his punitive carbon tax. Manitobans at this useless Liberal MPs are not worth the cost. Will the Prime Minister allow the member for...
And they're having a hard time getting through this one. The Liberals know they're a big joke. They're a sham. They're a scam.
I would have liked
They
to
are.
have heard the honourable member's end of question. Unfortunately, the honourable member's time had expired.
Yeah.
And then some. This is a reason why it's important for both sides of the House.
Oh,
Please
I
allow
see.
the member to ask a question without interrupting, so that we can hear the question and the member can profit from the full time that the member would be entitled to. Is the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. The member wants to hear more from me. I'm happy to.
Well, this is the idiot from Winnipeg.
At the end of the day, I want to remind members across the way, an issue with the Conservative Party. Remember, I always say they're like a fish on a dock, flip-flopping all over the place, Mr. Speaker? That applies on the carbon price, too. I'll tell you
What
what
a
the leader
joke.
of the
These are the
Conservative
ones
Party doesn't tell
flip-flopping on the
Canadians.
carbon
He's going to
tax.
take away the rebate, Mr. Speaker. That's going to take out of the pockets 80% of the constituents of Winnipeg North, the people I represent, money out of their pocket. Shame on the leader for the official
What a
opposition.
joke. No
for
one's
being
getting
so
this
reckless
rebate.
and risky, Mr.
How do they come
Speaker.
up with this 80% figure? These people are just morons. And even if you're getting a rebate, you gotta be a mentally incapable person to think it's more than you're spending on carbon tax. I mean, how stupid do they think people are? Pretty stupid, obviously.
The honourable member from Calgary Skyview.
Mr. Speaker, I join Canadians across the country in giving a warm welcome and congratulations to our newest Supreme Court Justice, Mary T. Moreau.
Oh,
Justice
okay.
Moreau was selected by the Independent Advisory Council, nominated by the Prime Minister, and will be sworn into her new position today.
There's nothing independent about that advisory council.
Canadian from
Yes.
Alberta,
How
who will
Orwellian
serve
is that?
Canadians well in this important role. Can the Minister of Justice and Attorney General inform this House on what makes Justice Moreau
Another
the right
non-entity
fit for a Supreme
introducing
Court,
a
and
non-entity.
How will her appointment enhance our country's legal system?
Yeah, okay. That was a nice softball for you. And this.
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General for Canada.
Thank you to the member from Calgary Skyview for that important question.
Who
Justice
the hell
Moreau
is this guy?
a proud
Suddenly
Franco-Albertan
became the
and previous
Attorney
Chief
General.
Justice of the Court of King's Bench of Alberta. She has a wealth of experience as a trial lawyer, as well as nearly 30 years of experience as a judge. She is a talented legal mind, an outstanding jurist, Mr. Speaker, and an expert in criminal law. And her appointment is a milestone for our country. With Justice Moreau, the judges on Canada's Supreme Court are now represented by a majority of women for the first time in Canadian history.
Yes, congratulations, Kel. It won't be on for much longer. It won't last much longer, Liberals.
The honourable member from North Island, Powell River.
Mr. Speaker, women veterans will be attending commemoration services this week. Many of them will be asked if the medals they are wearing belong to their husband or their son or their father. Too often they feel invisible and diminished when they should feel acknowledged and respected for their service.
What?
This
Talk
must
about creating
change.
a problem
Will the
that doesn't
minister commit
exist.
today to ensuring the participation of women veterans in Remembrance Day commemoration this year.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
I think it's our government's commitment, and I can surely assure you on behalf of the Minister of Veterans Affairs and Associate Minister of Defence that women will always participate in Remembrance Day ceremonies, and their participation is a must. Thank you.
The
Honourable Member from Spadina, Fort York.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are witnessing the glorification of terrorism and incitement of hatred against the Jewish community at pro-Hamas terror rallies across our country. At a Queen's Park rally in Toronto, genocidal slogans called for violent acts against innocent civilians. B'nai B'rith have reported these rallies that support a listed terrorist organization. Mr. Speaker, why has the Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada been silent on such grotesque displays of anti-Semitism and incitement? Has he asked his provincial and territorial counterparts to enforce Canada's hate propaganda laws? Mr. Speaker, Canadians believe in the rule of law, not
Trudeau's
mob
all over the map on this issue. Have you noticed that? It's just he tweets one way the one day, then tweets another day the next day. It's,
the Honourable Minister.
He is trying once again
being silent. Our government
Dominic
has condemned
Ladolt.
all incitements to violence, all expressions of hate. Regularly, I talk to federal law enforcement authorities, the RCMP, CSIS, to understand what they're doing with provincial, territorial partners, municipal partners, to keep all communities safe. And Mr. Speaker, today, I announced enhancements to the security infrastructure program to help all communities that are understandably concerned for their safety better prepare and discourage any potential act of violence. We're there to keep all communities safe, Mr. Speaker, and we'll continue to do that important work that all Canadians expect of us.
And with that comes the end of question period.
So we're going to see.
Rising on a point of order is the Honourable Member.
Uh-oh. We're going to have to switch over to the House of Commons. Just hold on, folks. We're going to have to switch where we are.
Rising on a point of order is the Honourable Member from Battle River, Crowfoot.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And as you said in your statement a number of weeks ago, a well-placed heckle is certainly within the context of what decorum is
So
in
we'll
this
see
place.
if the
However,
if the motion is coming up soon. We're going to stay and watch.
For members to be able to take
If
photographs.
it's not,
member from Kingston and
we'll
the
say adieu
Islands
for
during
now.
A previous state visit, quite notably, was recording what was taking place in this House. But, Mr. Speaker, what was found today is that at the time of 2:36 and 18 seconds today, the member from Etobicoke Centre, while on camera, shown up on CPAC and Parle View for all to see, appeared to be filming the proceedings of this place while the member from Milton was not answering a question but responding to a question, Mr. Speaker. I would ask that you take a look at the video and that member apologize for so willfully disregarding the order and decorum that we expect all in this place to ensure that we can take our debate seriously here.
My goodness.
Rising on point of order, I believe, is a Member of Parliament from Kingston and the Islands. On the same point of order.
Well,
Thank you,
let's see
Mr.
what
Speaker.
happens.
I just want to confirm that at no time when the mace is on the table have I ever taken a video in this house. I am fully aware of the rules.
The Honourable Member from Elmwood Transcona is also rising on the same point of order.
I am, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much. I just want to point you to a ruling, and you'll forgive me because I'm spontaneously on my feet. I don't remember the date, but I do recall the member from Carleton having done a very similar thing, taking a recording as he was leaving the House of Commons. So I would exhort you to take a look at that incident and the ruling that followed it for guidance in this case. Thank you.
Yeah, you got to tell that speaker where to go. That's for sure.
The honourable member from Etobicoke Centre rising on the same point of order.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today is a special day for me because my father was in the gallery for the first time watching question period, and I attempted to take a photo of him in the gallery. To the extent that I broke the rules, I apologize for that to all members of this House.
Okay, crisis is over.
I thank
Crisis is over, folks.
colleagues. First, I'd like to thank the member from Battle River Crowfoot for raising this point of order. And I also have heard the point of order from other members who rose on the same issue. I'd like to thank the honourable member from Etobicoke Centre for rising in this House to apologize. This is a good opportunity for me to remind all members that while the House is in session, that we are not to use our devices for phone calls or for recording in this House. It is important for all of us to do this so that we could freely exercise our roles as members of Parliament. As we know, we have very clear rules in terms of the use of how the cameras are used in this place, the cameras which are provided by CPAC. And this is a reason why, with, yes, the advent of these new technologies, we have to be very mindful of this. So I thank all members for that. I see the Honourable House Whip for the official opposition rising. Is this on the same point of order? Go ahead.
Sure. With respect, Mr. Speaker, it isn't enough for the member to just apologize. He must delete what it is that he recorded because it is against the standing rules.
I thank the Honourable Whip for the official opposition on this point. I take it as, and I'm certain all members who are listening carefully to the chair will take it upon themselves to act honourably. I think what the honourable member has raised is an important issue, and I would trust that when the member had presented his apology, he'll also take corrective action to that effect. It being 3:22 p.m., the House will now proceed to the taking of the deferred recorded division on the motion of Mr. Poilievre relating to the business of supply. Call in the members. Thank you.
So we're just seeing now is if this is going to be a long process. I'll sign off, but I just want to see what's happening here because you never know. Of course, with total silence now because of this damn speaker's rules. You can never hear anything. What the hell was that about?
The question is as follows. Monsieur Poilievre, appuyé.
Mr. Poilievre, seconded by Mr.
Here we go.
Shipley, moved that given that the government has announced a temporary 3-year pause to the federal carbon tax on home heating oil, the House call on the government to extend that pause to all forms of home heating.
Wow, what's going on?
La période de 10 minutes pour les députés votants.
The 10-minute period for members voting electronically has started, and the House will now proceed to the vote for members participating in person. All those in favor of the motion will please rise.
Mr. Poilievre.
Mr. Schmale.
Mr. Schmale.
Mr. Ellis.
This won't take long.
Mrs. Thomas.
Mrs. Thomas.
Mr. Denton.
Mr. Deltel.
Mrs. Stubbs.
Mrs. Stubbs.
Mr. Police.
Takes a lot less time than it does in the
Mr.
U.S.
Scheer.
Congress.
Mr. Scheer.
Mr. Upal.
Did you ever watch a
Ms.
vote there?
Landsman.
Ms. Landsman.
Mr. Halan.
Mr. Halan.
Ms. Lewis Haldeman Norfolk.
Ms. Lewis Haldeman Norfolk.
Mr. Barrett.
Mr. Barrett.
Mrs. Gray.
Mrs. Gray.
Mr. Barlow.
Mr. Barlow.
Mr. Kelly.
Mr. Kelly.
Mr. Baldinelli.
Mr. Baldinelli.
Mr. Cooper.
Mr. Cooper.
Mr. Lewis Essex.
Mr. Lewis Essex.
Mr. Jennis.
Mr. Jennis.
Mr. Small.
Mr. Small.
Mr. Bazan.
Mr. Bazan.
Mr. Richards.
Mr. Richards.
Mr. Duncan Stormont Dundas, South Glengarry.
Mr. Duncan Stormont Dundas, South Glengarry.
Mr. Beltud.
Mr. Berthold.
Mr. Workington.
Mr. Workington.
Ms. Finley.
Ms. Finley.
Mr. Chong.
Mr. Chong.
Mr. Abutaif.
Mr. Abutaif.
Mrs. Kuzi.
Mrs. Kuzi.
Mr. Seaback.
Mr. Seaback.
Ms. Ferrari.
Ms. Ferrer.
Mrs. Block.
Mrs. Block.
Mr. Stewart.
Mr. Stewart.
Mr. Davidson.
Mr. Davidson.
Mr. Doherty.
Mr. Doherty.
Mr. Macaulay Edmonton West.
Mr. Macaulay Edmonton West.
Mr. Lloyd.
Mr. Lloyd.
Mr. Aitchison.
Mr. Aitchison.
Mr. Brassard.
Mr. Brassard.
Mrs. Vecchio.
Mrs.
So we'll
Vecchio.
see if any
Mr.
block
Brock.
member stands up for
Mr.
this.
Lawrence.
Mrs.
We'll know
Roberts.
if it's a
Mrs.
free
Roberts.
vote.
Mr. Williams.
Mr. Williams.
And we'll
Mr.
know
Lowe.
if they've got
Mr. Tucker.
Mr.
if
Tucker.
Trudeau
Chambers.
and
Mr. Chambers.
and the
Mrs.
bloc
Cramp
have
Nyman.
cooked
Mrs.
up
Cramp Nyman.
Mr.
another
Mr. Zimmer.
coalition.
Mr.
Mr. Patzer.
Mr. Law.
Mr. Law.
As
Mr.
Pierre
Kitchen.
Polyev
Mr.
mentioned at the
Kitchen.
beginning
Mr.
of
Muse.
question period.
Mr. Muse.
Mr. Redikoff.
Now, this is really
Redikoff.
sinister
Mr.
stuff
Van
going on here.
Mr. Van Poppel.
Really
Mr. Waugh.
sinister.
Mr. Waugh.
Mr. Steinley.
Mr. Steinley.
Mr. Calkins.
Mr. Calkins.
Ms. Rude.
Ms. Rude.
Monsieur Leroux.
Monsieur Lew.
Mr. Genereux.
Monsieur Genereux.
Mr. Genereux.
Mr. Genereux.
Mr. Morantz.
Mr. Morantz.
Mr. Mazer.
Mr. Mazier.
Ms. Falk Battleford Lloydminster.
Mrs. Falk Battlefoot Lloydminster.
Mr. Meltel.
Monsieur Martel.
Mr. Gould.
Monsieur Gould.
Mr. Kirk.
Mr. Kirk.
Mrs. Gallant.
Mrs. Gallant.
Mr. Caputo.
Mr. Caputo.
Mr. Vidal.
Mr. Vidal.
Mr. Dreeshen.
Mr. Dreeshen.
Ms. Rempel Garner.
Ms. Rempel Garner.
Mr. Cram.
Mr. Cram.
Mr. Tolmie.
Mr. Tolmie.
Mrs. Wagenthal.
Mrs. Wagenthal.
Mr. Epp.
Mr. Epp.
Mr. Bragdon.
Mr. Bragdon.
Mr. Allison.
Mr. Allison.
Mr. Dalton.
Mr. Dalton.
Mr. Nader.
Mr. Nader.
Mr. Soroka.
Mr. Soroka.
Mr. McLean.
Mr. McLean.
Mr. Shipley.
Mr. Shipley.
Mr. McGuire.
Mr. McGuire.
Mr. Shields.
Mr. Shields.
Mr. Falk Provencher.
Mr. Falk Provencher.
Mr. Motts.
Mr. Motts.
Mr. Williamson.
Mr. Williamson.
Mr. Arnold.
Mr. Arnold.
Mr. D'Entremont.
Mr. D'Entremont.
Mr. Morrison.
Mr. Morrison.
Mr. Dowdle.
Mr. Dowdle.
Mr. Weber.
Mr. Weber.
Mr. Lake.
Mr. Lake.
Mr.
So will
Vierson.
Trudeau
Mr.
even be
Mr.
here to
Fast.
vote
Mr.
against
Fast.
this
Mr.
motion?
Canna.
Mr.
I
Cannon.
somehow
Leslie.
doubt it.
Mr. Leslie.
Mr. Majumdar.
Mr. Majumdar.
Mr. Julian.
Mr. Julian.
Mr. Massey.
Mr. Massey.
Mr. Garrison.
Mr. Garrison.
Mr. Cannings.
Mr. Cannings.
Ms. Barron.
Ms. Barron.
Ms. Zarillo.
Ms. Zarillo.
Mr. Angus.
Mr. Angus.
Ms. Matheson.
Ms. Matheson.
Ms. McPherson.
Ms. McPherson.
Mr. Blakey.
Mr. Blakey.
Mr. Vong.
Mr. Vaughn.
Uh-huh.
Que tous ceux qui s'opposent
All those opposed to the motion will please rise.
Ms. Gould.
Mr. Blair.
Mr. Blair.
Mr. O'Regan.
Mr. O'Regan.
Ms. Ing.
Ms. Ing.
Mr. Champagne.
Monsieur Champagne.
Ms. Anand.
Ms. Anand.
Mr. Fraser.
Mr. Fraser.
Mr. Boissonneau.
Monsieur Boissonneau.
Mr. Varani.
Mr. Varani.
Ms. Sachs.
Ms.
Yeah,
Sachs.
so I think we can
Suds.
Ms. Bennett.
fairly say this motion will not pass.
Ms. Chager.
A story today is how
Mr. McKay.
Trudeau has
Mr.
co-opted
McKay.
separatists
Ms. Sproul.
to
Mr.
bolster
McGinty.
his carbon
Mr.
tax.
McGinty.
Mr. Scarpelleggia.
Mr. Scarpelleggia.
Mr. Casey.
Mr. Casey.
Ms. Cara.
Ms. Cara.
Madame Saint-Onge.
Madame Saint-Onge.
Ms. Haidu.
Ms. Haidu.
Mr. McKinnon-Gatineau.
Monsieur McKinnon-Gatineau.
And
Ms.
Trudeau
Jacek.
was
Ms.
not
Jacek.
there
Madame Fortier.
Madame
to
Fortier.
support his own carbon tax.
Madame Lalonde.
Madame Lalonde.
Mr. Gerritsen.
Mr. Gerritsen.
Mr. Lamoureux.
Mr. Lamoureux.
Madame Bendayen.
Madame Bendayen.
Mr. Frederiskatos.
Mr. Fergus-Scatos.
Mr. Bittel.
Mr. Biddle.
So this
Mr.
really
Bruson.
is scandalous.
Mr. Bruson.
It's
Mr. Vancouverden.
historically
Mr. Vancouverden.
Mr.
scandalous.
Kuzmarchuk.
Mr. Kuzmarchuk.
Ms. Dillon.
Trudeau's
Dillon.
so desperate
Mr.
to avoid an
Elkoury.
embarrassment
Mr. Essasi.
Mr.
that he's in bed with
Assassi.
Mr.
separatists
Elkoury.
now.
Mr. Elkoury.
Mr. Fonseca.
Mr. Fonseca.
Mr. Hardy.
As bad as his
Mr.
father
Cedar
was,
Brampton East.
that's
Mr.
one thing his
Cedar
father
Brampton
would
East.
never have
Mr.
done.
Mr. Badaway.
Mr.
And that's
Sousa.
really a
Mr.
turning point for
Sousa.
Justin
Malone.
Trudeau.
Mr. Malone.
Another
Mr. Sarai.
Mr. Sarai.
turning
Mr.
point for
Kellaway.
Justin
Mr.
Trudeau.
Kellaway.
He will do
Ms.
anything
Vandenberg.
and everything to maintain his grip on power.
Mr.
He
Say.
is a dictator. He's an authoritarian ruler who will do whatever he has to do to maintain his grip on power. This is historically embarrassing and an
Mr.
atrocity.
Longfield. Mr. McDonald.
I am just so fed up.
Mr.
with watching
Morrissey.
these liberals get away with this
Ms.
crap
Hefner.
and this chronic
Ms.
nonsense.
Cedar Brampton South.
Cedar Brampton South.
Mr. Sorbera.
Mr. Sorbera.
Mrs. Said.
By the way, I just
Mr. Rogers.
received news that
Ms.
another
Yip.
premier, an NDP premier,
Madam Mendes.
has joined other
Mr.
provincial
Louis
premiers in
Kitchener-Conestoga.
demanding
Mr. Louis
that
Kitchener-
this
Mr. Van
pause
Bynen.
be
Mr.
extended
Van Bynen.
Mr.
to
Ali.
natural gas and
Ali.
propane.
Ms. Bradford.
So Trudeau is
Bradford.
becoming
Madame Chatel.
completely
Madame
encircled
Madame Lapointe.
by opponents.
Mr.
And he can
McDonald
buy
Malpeque.
off separatists all he wants,
Mr. Meow.
but he's losing.
Meow.
Ms. Taylor Roy.
He's losing ground. He's losing his grip
Thompson.
on his caucus, on his cabinet,
Mr. Terrien.
and he's losing his grip on history.
Mr. Simard.
And Trudeau has
Simard.
become
Bergeron.
a national
Bergeron.
embarrassment.
Mr. Garon.
Monsieur Garon.
Madame Michaud.
Madame Michaud.
Monsieur Fortin.
Monsieur Fortin.
Monsieur Villemur.
Monsieur Villemur.
Monsieur Thériault.
Monsieur Thériault.
Madame Larouche.
Madame Laroche.
Monsieur Perron.
Monsieur Perron.
Monsieur Barcelou Duval.
Monsieur
So this went pretty well, pretty much as we
Madame
anticipated.
Berube.
Madame Bérubé.
Monsieur Désiré.
Liberals and the
Monsieur
Bloc have
Désilets.
combined to defeat the Conservative motion to put a pause on the carbon tax on home heating fuel.
The House will now wait for the electronic voting period to end before resuming its proceedings.
Let's take a few minutes here. Well, I think we'll put something on for you if that's okay. Let me see here. See, this is the motion presented by Mr. Polyev, extend the pause to all home heating fuel. And it has been, I can tell you right now, defeated. I don't have to wait for there's not many people not present today. Here's the distribution of the seats in the House of Commons. All the Liberals have to do is get that extra support from the NDP, which is 25. But they got it from the Bloc. What the Conservatives need, essentially, to defeat this government, this Trudeau government, in a non-confidence motion, and today was not a non-confidence motion, is both the Bloc and the NDP to join them in opposition to the Liberal government. And from what we heard today from Pierre Poilievre, it seems that Trudeau has concocted another alliance with the Bloc to avoid that ever happening. But he is desperate to retain power in Canada, to retain his grip on his leadership. And I don't know if this is going to work because I think he's facing tremendous internal opposition as well. Now, Dan McTeague, a good friend of mine, a former Liberal member from Scarborough, who's one of the last common sense Liberals there was, and he's now working against the carbon tax in terms of fair energy for Canadians. And I interviewed Dan a month and a half ago for my show, Craydon's Right and Stand on Guard. And Dan is urging people today to call, email, text, phone, buttonhole your Liberal MP and tell them to vote against what Trudeau is telling you and vote for this Conservative motion. Here's a little bit on heat pumps. I saw a lot of people say this in the comments section today, and I've been saying this every day during question period. Heat pumps do not work below 15 degrees Celsius. They don't work. So they're no magic solution, and they're powered by electricity. Where does the electricity come from? Is it a magic source? Is there a magic source of power for electricity? Or does it generate carbon emissions? Oh no, it's not carbon neutral either. Not only are they not free for anybody, but they're not carbon neutral, and they don't even work in Canadian winters. So this is a cruel joke. I've said this about a dozen times. Yeah, it's a cruel joke, and it is a horrible policy. That's not an answer to anybody's heating problems. It's not a solution to home heating. It is a joke, and it's been developed and proposed by a clown named Justin Trudeau. And it's being supported by the other clowns in the Liberal cabinet, like Wilkinson and Freeland and Pablo Escobar and the rest of these clowns who really think this is an option. And it's not. It's not going to work. So, here's a joint statement on federal carbon tax from the premiers who are opposed to it. And I've just told there's a sixth premier who's just joined this list. So this is extremely important. This is extremely important. And I think it is the reason why Trudeau is encircled by political opponents. And I think that's probably the case in his own party, in his own caucus. He's not keeping this together. All right, we're just getting the results here.
135, nays contre, 186, 186.
I declare the motion defeated.
No surprise there. But we know why it was defeated, don't we, people?
Rising on a point of order.
Order, I recognize the Honourable House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We just had a very important vote to Canadians. And the
I wanna
members
listen to
of
this, too.
Avalon literally gave the finger to those Canadians as he stood to vote for our motion, which was to give them a break and a reprieve on home heating costs. He gave the finger to the senior.
He gave the
between
finger.
heating
Exactly,
and
Carrie
heat.
Lynn.
He gave the finger to all those struggling to make ends meet in an unaffordable Canada. He gave the finger to all Canadians watching.
Uh-oh, the speaker doesn't like that. No, you can't say that about Liberals giving the finger. No. But she's right. Just like Pierre Trudeau, you may remember Pierre Trudeau literally giving the finger to protesters outside of his train in British Columbia. And the Liberals have done that today, and the Bloc Québécois has done that. Oh, and this Ken McDonald, take it what they like. Now he's got what he wants. He's from Newfoundland. He got his carbon tax exemption. So now he's giving the rest of Canada the finger, isn't he? These people are bloody hypocrites. This is all rubbish, all nonsense.
It's very unusual to scratch the side of your head with your middle finger as you are voting. And this is the second time I've had to rise in this place when a member from the government party has used that finger motion.
The speaker's shutting it down again. No, this is part of the story now. Liberal gives the finger to Canadians.
We are now, colleagues, I'm going to ask you to take
All right.
your seats, please. Please.
I think there's probably enough drama for today. Thank you so much, everybody,
Colleagues,
for watching today.
We had a point of order raising a very serious issue in terms of comportment, decorum, and respect.
I just want to see how this ends here. This is quite fascinating.
The member to whom it was directed at rose and indicated that this was not done on purpose. I'm placed in a very difficult situation here. If honorable colleagues will allow me to take a look at this issue, but let me just say this. When members
did he give the finger? Of course he did.
To explain
because he got his carbon tax exemption. The hell with the rest of the country. That's the liberal way of thinking.
I will take a look at that, and if necessary,
anyway,
come back to that.
Part of the story, I don't want to keep you any longer. Thank you so much for watching today. Thank you so much for being a part of this. If we have any other events like this after question period, I'd love to extend the length and to keep on talking, commenting, and hearing your comments. Thank you so much for being part of this today. And I really appreciate you being there and being part of this procedure and being part of what's going on historically. We have to beat the carbon tax one way or the other. A 3-year pause is not good enough. especially one on heating oil that only affects a small percentage of the population, a small percentage of people in this country, but a large percentage of Liberal votes right now. And that's all this has been about. This is a travesty. And we are going to continue to monitor this. And this is a breaking story. And remember what happened here. The Trudeau government's in bed with the separatists now. They've been in bed with the socialists. Now they're in bed with the separatists. That's what's going on here. And this really is another example of Trudeau's duplicity. Thanks for watching. I'll be with you again tomorrow in question period. The Freedom Trial is not on for another couple of weeks. Believe it or not, it's been recessed for 3 weeks as of last Friday. So I'll be spending more time in question period dwelling on that. Thanks for watching again. We love you here, and we love your support, and we love your comments.